Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Hour and Q&A with Florian Schattenmann, the ACS President-Elect. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this evening's Happy Hour. My name is Beth Lorsbach, and I am really honored and privileged to have the opportunity to introduce Florian and also his lovely wife, Sheree Schattenmann. And so we have some questions that we've prepared to ask Florian, but please submit your questions using the QR code on the screen. You can go to Mentimeter and enter your question. We'll be answering those throughout the happy hour this evening. So we want to begin by just giving Florian a chance to introduce himself and again, his platform for why he's running for president-elect of the ACS. So I'll turn it over to Florian.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. I really appreciate the introduction and for being the moderator today in the spirit of an informal happy hour. I have a little Bavarian beverage with me and have the opener that I always used in the ACS national meeting and so on to get started. So please chime in here. I wanted to welcome everyone to this webcast. I think it's like something different, and we're excited to have and engage with you here. I'm very excited and very humbled to have the opportunity to be the president, to be the final two candidates of the ACS President-Elect. Really something I've been looking forward to. I've put a lot of time and thought into this. And I'm excited to tell you a little bit about my platform, where I'm coming from, maybe introduce myself. I'm originally from Germany, and then came to grad school here, and then spent some time in a bunch of different companies. We can talk more about this later. And I'm now the Chief Technology Officer for Cargill, which is the world's largest food and ag company. When it comes to my platform, I have really three topics that I'm really excited about and I'm passionate about. The first one is it's around inclusive and diverse teams. And that's been something that's very personal to me. Obviously, from the get-go, since I met my wife, that's been a lot of learning. But what I really learned in this setting of an industrial setting in the different companies that I worked for is if you have teams with different people, with different viewpoints, it makes us all stronger. So I always felt when you have diverse teams and diverse teams where everybody belongs, where everybody is part of, when they work together, magic happens. And so I really wanted to focus on that aspect and keep that driving, right? The second one is around a healthy, collaborative ecosystem between sort of the trifecta: academia, government, and industry. When I'm especially, of course, thinking about industry, because when I joined industry after grad school in the 1990s, and what I see today, it has changed fundamentally. At the time when I joined, you took the typical choice was between academia, maybe a government lab, or you go into one of the big companies, DuPont, Kodak, Exxon, and any of those. Many of those companies, Höchst in Germany and so on, they don't even exist anymore. Others have scrambled their businesses that you almost cannot recognize. But one thing almost nobody went to was a startup company. I can't remember a single person from our year that joined a startup company, and that has fundamentally changed. If you go to places like MIT and Berkeley and so on, a large portion goes to startups. So has the ACS really kept up with the pace and seen, and how do we engage with industrial members and bring them all together? And then the third one is around sustainability. It is clearly the defining issue of our times. And when I look at the technologies that are needed for sustainable living for us, like battery technology or hydrogen or whatever it may be, it all depends. The linchpin is always chemistry, bioeconomy, same thing. So So chemistry really as the solution. But when you think about the court of public opinion, chemistry typically is the problem. So when I thought about this and thought about this opportunity, very honored, very humbled to be nominated. I thought about my executive background, my governance experience. I thought a lot about the storytelling, the spokesperson that I've become, that I had to become in my role, my media exposure, talking to companies, to media outlets like Wall Street Journal, Economist, and whatever. I felt like I can really add to that. The ACS presidency is also a outward facing function, and I think I can bring a lot to the table. So just a couple of words, a couple of minutes to get us kicked off. But that's why I'm excited, and that's why I hope you will vote for me on starting September 25th.
Excellent. Thanks, Florian. Okay, now we're going to move to the question and answer period. And so again, please, for those of you who have joined or just joined, please go to Mentimeter and submit questions. And again, we'll be answering those throughout this happy hour. So maybe just to kick it off, Florian, you mentioned your background in industry, and within the ACS, it's always been, at least over the most recent years, a challenge to attract industry members to the ACS. So maybe give us your thoughts on how you'll use your industry experience, knowledge to not only attract members from industry to the ACS, but really to showcase how the ACS can be of value to them.
I think that's a great question. And the last thing I heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you know a lot about this, Beth, but the ACS has been losing industrial members, so in the tune of about 2,000 per year, right? So it's been really a significant and a continuous decline. I'm going to go a little bit back to how to my own life in industry and how it changed, but then also a little bit of the things that I've learned, and maybe also a little bit of why I think I can connect to the to potential industrial members rejoining or new members joining the ACS, right? Because in the end of the day, it is about connection. It is about the why I'm bringing you in, right? So right after grad school, I went to a CPG country, a consumer goods company, Colgate-Palmolive, right? So I got to learn that a little bit. And then I was for a long time at GE when it was at the peak with Jack Welch running the company. So I saw that really that large company feel. But then after about 9 years in GE, my business unit got sold into private equity. So all of a sudden, the priorities shifted. It was a different style, right? And then after that, I left from there and I went to a startup. I got that feeling of how life in a startup is, and it's about skill building. It's about access to networks. When I was at GE, we had 330,000 employees. There's a lot of networks inside the company. At the startup company, we had 22. I mean, you run out of people to talk to quickly, right? So you have 22 people. So how do you get a network? So that's when organizations like ACS also become very important, right? But got to be very relevant here. From there, I went to Dow, a large company again, and now and then after that, I went from the petrochemical supply chain that I had been in my entire life and went into the bio-based supply chain. So another change. At Cargill, I also sit on the venture board, which connects directly with startups all the time. So I'm seeing some of the pain points. I want to bring some of those viewpoints that these members have. They've been telling me, I've talked to some people in startups like, well, the ACS, it's clearly journals are important. We like that access. There's some good talks, but I need more access to network and connection. I need some of the programming has to be more relevant for me and so on. The nice thing about the ACS, there is an initiative or a strategy for almost anything there, right? But now I can put my weight towards that. I'm planning to engage with that initiative, but I also would like to listen more. I get the input more, and then honestly, most importantly, energize and engage the industrial community. Really drive some of my personal connections. One thing I have, as I'm in the middle of being a CTO, lots of connections, right? Use my social media platform just in re-energize that industrial membership.
Excellent. And so maybe, just following up on that, networks, connections are clearly important to you and are critical to the ACS. And, certainly any of us who've navigated the ACS website or a national meeting, at times have maybe felt a little bit overwhelmed or lost. And so what advice would you give to, somebody attending their first ACS meeting on how to network and how to engage and create that first step in building their networks?
I love the question, Beth, and I can look back and I remember very much how I felt in the beginning when I came to my first meeting. As a matter of fact, the funny part is when you look back how I even got into the ACS, which is sort of maybe a funny. I grew up in Germany. I got my undergrad in Germany. I did my diploma chemical, which is like a master thesis in Germany, and so the only way, and I want to speak a little bit to our global colleagues here, right? The real engagement of the ACS is actually through the journals in at first, right? And so there was Science, Nature, JAX. Science, Nature, JAX. That was a trifecta for me. Now as a German, you can throw the Angewandte in there, but that was sort of the way you came, right? So then I came to the US and joined and got my PhD went to MIT, got my PhD in Dick Schrock's lab. One of the lucky moments doing my research was that I got a regioselective catalysis going with a new catalyst system, and that particular result was published in JAX. So I was super excited, and I actually still have that issue of JAX from 1996 or 1995 or something on my shelf here. And but there I was like, okay, this is the coolest organization. I got to get into this, right? And then following that, I came to my first ACS meeting, and I'm like, wow, this is like Oktoberfest in terms of the density, right? There's people in everywhere, and where do you go? And there's like 100 and some things going on at the same time. And I think the first step that I would say, pick a friend, find a friend, find somebody that can give you a little bit of guidance how this goes. The technical stuff you could find out. Back then we had these big paper volumes. Now it's a fancy app, right? But look at the topics that you're interested in, but talk through, have somebody to talk through all this. The next one is find out where some of the key events is for engagement, right? So the CIMIX, it's always the coolest thing. That's where all the papers are. That's where you get to meet a lot of people. Once you meet a lot of people, you're going to be in good shape, right? The other thing is like the international reception for international members. I would say women's chemists, senior chemists, young chemists. So wherever you are, whoever you are, you're going to have something to connect. So once you start looking at a few things, you're going to have that connection, and it always is about connection, and then you can take it from there.
Excellent, fantastic. While you're getting a drink of your beverage, and hopefully folks who've just joined or have been with us are looking at the Mentimeter and are going to be brave enough to submit a question. We'd really love to hear from you. So please submit a question. We're entertaining all questions. So this is your opportunity to really ask Florian anything. So if there's no questions on Mentimeter, maybe Florian, you can tell us a little bit about what changes that you would you would be bringing to the ACS if elected. So maybe just highlight one or two specific. I know you gave us an overview of your platform, but really maybe one or two things that you'd really like to focus on and bring about change to the ACS.
Well, let me jump on maybe the one that I feel like I can put a lot towards it is that storytelling and some of those connections into into how we show up, the face of the ACS, right? I feel like I can use some of my connections here to really drive some of the key stories. I want to be an amplifier. I think the ACS does a lot of great stuff, but I think what it needs sometimes is an energetic, maybe hopefully a little inspirational missionary around this, right? And I think that's where I can really make a big difference. And then the other thing is sustainability. I have made that transition after 20 years of the petrochemicals, in which it's been a super rewarding career in industry. I would 10 times out of 10 I would do it again, right? But then I went into that bioeconomy, and I think the ACS has and if I look at the bioeconomy, maybe I should say that first. When I look at the bioeconomy, how it economically works out will depend on chemistry and chemical engineering, and I think. And again, as I said before, the ACS has a strategic initiative for almost anything, including this. How do we get better connection into the life science? I sit at that nexus. I have 25 years when you count grad school and all the stuff, even more, of the classic chemical experience. I now have 5 years of fermentation, biochemistry, all that kind of stuff. How to bring this together, how to bring those communities together, how to make the connections and bring them together. Because I think that's where a lot of those sustainability challenges will have to be overcome. And I think the ACS can play a visible role. I can help to be the matchmaker, and we can get, I think, some wins that we can talk about. And in the end of the day, that's what it's all about for me.
Excellent. Very good. Well, we have our first question from Mentimeter. So the first question is, how do you view the ACS brand, and what do you think it stands for?
Ooh, that's a very thoughtful, very, very good question. I think that, first of all, the brand stands for excellence in I mean, in the end of the day, it's driven a lot by the journals and the national meetings. We talked about this before, right? It's an excellence in science, an excellence as a meeting point of the scientific community. I think it also stands for integrity and doing the right thing, and I think that's incredibly important. I cannot tell you, and for those that are on this webcast, every minute detail, the ACS has a real fairness to things, and I think that's part of the brand, and I think with that comes a lot of credibility. The one thing I think that we can start adjusting with the brand a little bit, it just to make sure that it goes with the times, right? And I think it has done this, but again, we talked about it has lost a little bit of the relevance with the industrial ACS members, and so how do we get that back? But I think the fundamental brand of the ACS is strong. It's built on science and integrity, and as a great connector point for the scientific enterprise. If we now sort of strengthen and amplify our storytelling and bring the third arm back into the mold more effectively, I think the ACS is in its future is really fantastic.
Okay, great. While we're looking for more Mentimeter questions, that was great. Thank you for those of you online who submitted it. There's the code. Please go there and submit. Now, maybe just a couple curveball questions for you, Florian. So first of all, what's your favorite element and why?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm gonna take molybdenum, and it's an emotional. It's an emotional kind of connection. It was the element that in the Schrock group, I made a new class of imido-alkylidine molybdenum complexes, and instead of the typical bis alkoxides, I stuck two carboxylates on there, and it did something really magic in the polymerization. And it's one of those things I'm always grateful for, right? And so those are some of the forming times. I've worked with silicones. So silicone will be my second, but there's a little bit of a love for molybdenum. So I don't know if that is a fair answer, but that's how I feel.
Excellent. Great. And then I guess if you could invite two chemists to dinner, dead or alive, who would you invite and what would you serve?
Oh baby. So let me start with what I would serve. I'm deep down, I'm deep in my Bavarian roots. So how about some bratwurst and sauerkraut? It's one of those essential dishes that I just love, and it just goes well with a little bit of with a pretzel, like a Bavarian pretzel, sauerkraut, and bratwurst. Who would I? You know what? And that's part of my gratitude. I would take my my thesis advisor, Dick Schrock. I've always had an incredible amount of respect and admiration for him. And then I would probably, I want to go deep back. I always was a little impressed by some of the PChem stuff that happened, even if ultimately organometallic chemistry became my thing. I'm gonna pick Avogadro, just because how do you know? I always found this like I mean, sorry, but as sort of a starting chemistry student, how the heck this is like this massive number of molecules in a mole. How do you determine all this and so on? So I might just pick him. I had like, that was a great curveball. I didn't see that one coming.
Well, you handled it great, as I knew you would, and expect that you'll handle many curveballs if elected as ACS president. And I guess maybe, following up on the curveballs, what do you think are a couple things that are key to you being successful as ACS president and implementing your vision and platform?
Maybe let me think about this. Number one is focus. I always felt like when you try 15 things, you kind of try nothing. So let me stick with. I rather get 2 or 3 things going, and so that's maybe my number one. Number two is leverage existing things. There's always this need, like, oh, I have to start my own thing and start this thing and start thing. There's a danger that once you go to president-elect, past president, by the time you're done and you kind of leave that, the effort might not survive, right? Do something that amplifies something that's already going on and put a little bit of your spin on it. So I know we talked a little bit about some of the things like the partnership between chemists and life science and so on. I can jump on things that already exist and just give them more life, right? And then one thing that I'm always super strong on, Beth, and I mean we know each other for a long time, is right. How to make people just go to the next level, right? And how to excite folks and really get them going on something. And I think the platforms that I've chosen, how can you not go around a diverse and inclusive teams? How can you not go around bringing the industrial membership back to the table with excitement? How can't you go excited about like sustainability and bringing this together? So I'm really looking for that aspect in getting the people like you and others that have been just tremendous over the last half a year and for many years as we work together, just excited about and help them in their cause, because I know we're aligned. So then there's many of us, right? So I think that's really what it's all about.
Excellent. Fantastic. Okay, again, everybody who's on the line, don't hesitate to submit your questions to the Mentimeter. We're asking questions. Oh, we do have a question. Fantastic. So, but here comes the QR code for those of you who joined. Please submit your questions. So, a question, Florian, from the audience. What is your position on AI and the impact on papers and copyright for presenters? So again,
that's a great question. That's a great question. So at Cargill, we built an R&D strategy that sits on 4 pillars. I will not bore you with this, but one of those pillars is called capabilities. And normally we look for, right, what are sort of the 2, 3, 4 things we need to invest in to be ready 5, 8 years from now, right? And so it could be fermentation, it could be whatever. Well, this year we said, like, time out. We're going to just get somebody and we're going to put everything onto what is AI doing for us and what is the threat, opportunities, challenges, what all this, and look at AI from every angle and how R&D can change. And so the work has just started. So I don't have necessarily all the answers yet. The other thing is we have the top patent IP attorney of the company also on my leadership team. He also is associated with us, and he is also the right now the president of the IP Lawyer Association of the United States. And so we have some discussions because IP law might change, right? What happens if a researcher asks an AI machine about a specific question? The AI, ChatGPT comes up with a solution. Well, U.S. patent law requires a human body with flesh and blood and a pulse to be an inventor. It can't be a machine, right? So there's a lot of questions to be answered. Now, everything we are at the fever pitch of the hype curve. So we have to also keep this in mind. Please go back into the key ages of nanotechnology, or everything's going to be changed. AI will play a strong role, but it won't be it will be more measured than we think. So we have to make it back out of the hype curve, back into the normal trough, right? And so really think, what are the tools we can use? Because we went from single experiments to high throughput, and then that was supposed to change everything. You know what? We still rely on our super smart researchers to do all the work. Now we're going to use AI. So I think what it can do, and that's just one vision, that our screening, our confidence of which areas to research will increase via AI. I think it will help us, and we can maybe shift some of the resource more to the validation and scale up. But we have to really start thinking through this. And the other thing that I'm going to end up with is I'm on 2 forums, on the American Chemical Society CTO, Chief Technology Officer Forum, but also on something called Innovate 50, which is sort of it's actually really 60 to 70, but fine. Innovation Chief Technology Officers of the largest companies around the world, right? And this is what we're thinking about. There's things we can do across industries. It doesn't have to be fixed or solved only by the chemical community. It affects many others. And I think we're going to start seeing some ways on how to deal with this and how to make sure that we're doing the right thing here.
Excellent. Thanks. We've got another question from Mentimeter, Florian. So you've talked a lot about supporting industry involvement within the ACS. And the question is, are there specific change drivers that are impacting the chemical industry? And if so, what are they? And then how can we take advantage of those to support ACS members? So chemistry drivers, or drivers that are change drivers that are affecting the chemical industry, and how do we take advantage of those to support our members?
Yeah, I think some of the change drivers are clearly the absolutely exorbitant and rightful focus on sustainability, right? So how do we bring circularity into plastics? How do we address how do we get to net zero and so on? And I think that has and again, I'm always having a global look here, right? So especially in the European community and so on, it's really the Green Deal and so on. It has put an enormous amount of pressure on the chemical industry. The chemical industry is extremely important to the well-being of mankind, but it will have to work under very different constraints, and that I think that has put a lot of pressure on, or will put a lot of pressure on us. I think the other area is that digital and AI and all these kind of drivers will accelerate the pace of change. Meaning, smaller players, startups, and so on will constantly drive new technologies. And then the third area that's kind of connected with the first area is this entire area around the regulatory, right? If you think what happened, when you think of PFAS and all these kind of things, a regulator in a given country will look very carefully, because long-term effects, as the name says, it can only be determined long-term. So what kind of risk profiles am I taking here to look further into the future, right? So I think the guardrails, the swimming lanes will be tighter defined. And I think industry will depend more and more actually on collaboration with that innovation ecosystem, which I think the ACS can be the greatest platform. So I think being stronger and appealing more to the changing, I would call it now private sector, right? Industry is almost, you think of a big company with big machines and so on. Is I think that entire private sector ecosystem, the ACS can be the great connector. It can be the platform, right? And I think we haven't spelled that out the right way. So I think that's a key area.
Excellent. So we're gonna shift gears. Thanks. There's the Mentimeter QR code. Please keep those questions coming. But one of the things I think at the ACS is, as we've talked about today, is a sense of belonging and the larger ACS family. And I know family is really important to you, Florian. And so I want to bring in Dr. Sheree Schattenmann, who knows you quite well, and really begin to have a conversation about family and maybe getting a little bit more personal as to what attributes, Sheree, you think Florian has to be ACS president.
Well, hi, Beth. Hi, everyone. Florian, I'm a little partial in some ways because, of course, I've known him for a really long time. At the forefront of my mind, I think the first couple of things I think about, one he mentioned is his focus. He has a really amazing ability, given a problem, given a change in career, given a move, given a new position, a new board, he can really focus in on what he needs to learn and come up to speed incredibly quickly so that he can be impactful. And so I think that's the second thing I would think about is it's important for him to be impactful. I think when presented with the opportunity to run for ACS President-Elect, he thought about it for quite a while. And I knew that when he came to me asking my thoughts, I knew he wouldn't do it if he didn't think he could make an impact. And so I think that anyone voting for him should know that he will absolutely give it his all to work through his platform, to listen to everyone's opinion about things that, they may think need to change or improve. But ultimately, he will always do what he thinks is best collectively to make the impact that's most needed. And I think he's outlined his viewpoint on those things in his platform. Another thing that is front of mind for me is, I tease him about about this all the time. I consider myself to be an extroverted introvert. Florian is 1000% extrovert. And I don't think I've ever met a person who is so capable of connecting with people. From a New York City taxi cab driver to the Trader Joe's checkout line, to, all the folks that he's met throughout all of his careers, leaders of companies, students through his involvement on boards at various universities, meeting private equity, young startup folks, to coaching our kids' sports and in himself playing on ice hockey teams, right? With people half his age. And so he's a connector. He's very passionate about people. He loves people. He loves connecting with people and understanding, how he can help, make people's lives better. So I have no doubt that if elected, he will make a very strong impact for the ACS, keeping his focus, his passion, connecting people, and his platform front of mind.
Excellent, excellent. And I guess, within the ACS and certainly, over the course of the last, 4 or 5 years, diversity, inclusion, respect, equity and respect has really been a key focus for the ACS and a key pillar. And maybe Florian and Sheree, you can give us your thoughts on DEIR and your personal journey as you started back at MIT together and your journey together, and maybe the challenges that you faced and how you've overcome those as a strong family unit.
Do you want to give it a start, or you want me to start?
Sure, I'll start. That's a good question. I started back at MIT, in 1993, the fall of 1993, fresh out of undergrad, graduating as a chemistry major from an all-girl private Catholic university in my hometown of Baltimore. And so you can imagine arriving at MIT there were quite a bit of changes for me, from being the only female in the lab of the modern genius Kit Cummins, to just being at such a large school and being in a totally different state. And my first flight was that same year to an ACS meeting as an undergrad to present a poster. And so, I came from Baltimore is a big town, but, I lived a pretty small town life there. And so I think that, the kind of things that I faced at MIT as far as like diversity and inclusion, we didn't use those words back then, that kind of adjustment for me, they had so many different factors. And, Florian had his own coming to the country as a German citizen and not growing up in this country. Mine was certainly centered around different things, but I think that was kind of the thing that we both discussed pretty early in our relationship, is that ultimately, right, everybody has some kinds of, things and changes that they have to deal with. For me, the most important, that's certainly what I experienced, at MIT, and especially working in Kit Cummins' lab, is being respectful of each other. We were all there on the common ground of mastering our area of chemistry. And so, ultimately we found that even though, not just with Florian, but all the guys that worked in my lab, right, our backgrounds were completely different. But as long as we kept a level of respect and inclusion, and my favorite word, kindness with one another, things kind of work out. And, we both grew a lot during those times. We grew together, we grew separately. And I think that, and we had a lot of conversations, which we won't talk about here now. But you know, we struggled with some topics, but we grew through those topics. And I think that again, speaking to both of us, we always tease that, you know, we couldn't have been more different coming together as a couple. But when you look beyond the surface things, our core values, they were aligned. And so I think that I've done a lot of diversity and inclusion work, especially in schools with kids, with parent groups and things like that. And, you know, ultimately, that's what it always boils down to, right? Being mindful to be respectful and kind and understand that your view is not the only view. And just kind of, you know, I don't like the word tolerant. I will say be accepting of those differences and understanding that if you do embrace them, those differences can actually be, like Florian said, pretty magical. So I think we've had pretty fun and magical 25-year marriage and 30 years of knowing each other.
That's great.
Yep.
Florian, any thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, you're looking at my teacher. You know, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. Think about it. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in southern Germany. That was a pretty homogeneous population, right? So that's really how I grew up, and then, you know, fell in love with this wonderful lady here. And there's certain things I had no awareness of, no understanding, and there was a lot of. She's still teaching me every day, and that's very, very important, right? She has also exposed me to exciting and learning opportunities, or just like experiences, right? And I've told the story before in all kinds of settings, but one of the early things we did when we started dating is that Sheree brought me along. She said, like, hey, the MIT Black graduate student they have a gala, and it's called the Ebony Affair, and I would love to bring you along. And after I passed a thorough inspection, we went there together, and it was at this beautiful old dining hall at MIT, and we checked in, and then we come around the corner, and it's this beautifully decorated place, and all these wonderfully dressed people, and all of a sudden I look around, and it's like I may be the only white guy in here, right? And it's just an acknowledgement, and it was just like, wow. And I had a great evening. I remember this evening like it is today, but I was included, and it was part of it. And so what I think I kind of bring to the table here a little bit is that this is when I talk DEIR, it's not some corporate initiative that told me some stuff, right? I've lived how I've felt how because one of the thoughts were, first of all, I got included, but the second thought, and it took me a while, is that actually this at that time we were dating, so she wasn't my wife yet, but this girlfriend here, this is probably her life when she goes down the hallway here, right? But it's not a theoretical concept. You have to experience this a little bit, and it was. And as I said, it was the greatest evening. I still remember it like it was yesterday. So it's a great experience. So there is like it just makes things real, and so, and I think that's really the power. And of course, when things like, you know, here in Minneapolis, 15 minutes by car, George Floyd, right? When these things happen, we talk, we learn, we grow together, like you said. But I honestly, I've learned a lot. I just want to say it, and I want to give my wonderful wife a lot of credit here, and that's wouldn't have happened without her. Just me. I'm going to end here.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Florian. Thank you, Sheree. As you can see, you know, a strong influence and just a wonderful couple. And thank you for, you know, bringing some of the human and insight into your lives. So we have a couple additional questions from Mentimeter. So the first one is, if you could pick any city to host an ACS meeting or event during your president term, where would you go and why?
So it's actually a really good question. So first of all, I don't know if the ACS ever has, the ACS president. I'm not entirely sure about the process, and I've asked some previous ACS presidents, and they weren't even entirely sure who picks it. But here's my answer, right? So there's all these. I want to pick a city that that is open to everyone. But it also provides the infrastructure and is welcoming. And so I live in Minneapolis. How about that, right? I mean, when you can when you can host the Super Bowl in the winter in Minnesota and do it successfully, you have something going on, right? And so maybe I wouldn't pick the spring meeting, but why not the fall meeting? And then I'm going to throw another Midwestern city in here, right? And I checked this actually recently because of. I had a discussion with somebody. Detroit, Detroit, of course, we, 10, 15 years ago, got some bad reps and so on, but give Detroit some credit, right? They have great facilities. They have really done a lot. They have their own identity. They pull themselves up, and you can go from the river now all the way to the new Red Wings Stadium or Piston Stadium and so on. And there's a lot to do, and it has a lot of history. So Minneapolis first, Detroit second. Both cities are inviting to everyone. Both cities provide fantastic infrastructure. Minneapolis has I think 4 years in a row now the best airport in the country. I can go on, and the mayor of Minneapolis, I don't know him, but it's really I think those kind of cities deserve a shot, and they're doing a great job.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, another question. So as chemists and engineers, what are the more fundamentals and foundational aspects of chemistry? What are the most fundamental and foundational aspects of chemistry that the ACS needs to nurture and grow into the next decades? So maybe rephrasing that a little bit, what do we need to really, really focus on? You mentioned focus earlier. That will push us towards the future for having platforms or benefits to chemists and engineers.
In the end of the day, it always comes down to people and the quality of people, right? And so I think, and if I look back, right, I've been sort of quote unquote in a leadership, administrative, whatever kind of position for a long time now, right? But I still draw a lot from my fundamentals. I can still probably give you with just a little bit of practice, a reasonable rendition of my graduate student talks. And I mean, this depth and deep science, curiosity-driven science, is something that is the foundation of what we do and how we look at problems. The approach to problem. Actually, Sheree and I have, my wife and I have talked about this multiple times. The fundamental approach about problem solving is something you learn in those kind of things, and you can only learn this when you apply some depth and so on. And I think that curiosity-driven research is important because many of those industrial, ubiquitous kind of innovation that we draw from now. Somebody's a long time ago had some curiosity-driven results that didn't look it wasn't entirely clear what the economic impact may be, but it led to all kinds of stuff, right? In later because somebody else took that results, and so I think we can never let that out. Quality of science is really is one of the most important things that I think we gotta preserve. With it, also the ethics that go with it. I think that's an enormously important part. If you can't, there's a lot of things you can't trust these days anymore, but you got to be able to trust science, right? And I think we have to make absolutely sure that I know there will, but the quality of our ACS journals will keep the same rigor. And sometimes you have to say no to a submission if it's not good enough, right? Because I think integrity and that kind of thing is going to be absolutely absolutely critical. When it comes to if I've understood the first version of the question really right, if you look at the fundamental science, I think, as I said, it can be in multiple areas. But how do we understand a lot of on that biochemistry side is going to be super important. But yeah, fundamentals in ethics, that's really key.